what kind of lawyer he was before, will he understand what my matter is all about? And there is a genuine concern because business has grown and business spans across hundreds and thousands of areas. Is judiciary equipped to take care? And that's why today's topic, continuing legal education for judges. Can you give an introduction before we go on to our specific questions?
Yeah, thank you so much, Tarun, and thank you and congratulations, NewsX, for this festival of ideas. Tarun, I think one of the things that people, those who are outside the legal system, may not be familiar is the fact that the Indian judiciary is significantly affected by the capacity that it has to deal with. People simply don't understand the kind of, just to give you a very simple data point, the Supreme Court of India delivers approximately 1,000 judgments a year. It ends up hearing 70,000 appeals. And so when we talk about the 50 crore cases that are pending in the Indian courts, with subordinate courts alone having a backlog of nearly 85% of the number and the high courts nearly 12%, we are talking about huge social expectations generated out of the court on the one hand, and the courts are simply not in a position to respond to that. So while that is the case, the issue that you have raised becomes important because, frankly speaking, our judges are not necessarily prepared for responding to the kind of complex cases that are coming before them. Not because they are not smart or intelligent enough or they are not working hard. It's just that continuing education as a framework for advancing legal knowledge, updating legal knowledge, developing new tools of interpretation, looking at comparative legal trends, these things have not been the case with regard to legal profession. In fact, continuing legal education for lawyers is also not happening. So I want to basically say that we simply have to reimagine the way judges are trained and judges' capacity is built. But we also need to really figure out that this enormous amount of workload that is, that the courts are dealing with is not sustainable.
This question to the people: when any of you, if you want to file for a divorce, you go to a divorce lawyer. You look for a lawyer who deals in family law matters. IP people will look for IP lawyers. So there is a need for specialization. Is there a need for specialization in the judiciary? Because lawyers are specializing. Yes. Will the judiciary need to specialize? No, there was an IP bench in the Delhi High Court. Yes. So there have been some things.
Absolutely. Well, I think the problem starts much earlier. So we have, for example, 1,700 plus law schools in India, and they are obviously very diverse and spread out. And when you become a lawyer, you get licensed to practice and then you continue to practice. There are not enough opportunities for even lawyers to update their knowledge. Continuing legal education is not a serious compulsory requirement for lawyers to update their knowledge. And then you get elevated as a judge and you become a judge of a court. Now, all these things that are happening, we set up the state judicial academies and the National Judicial Academy in Bhopal. It's not that the judiciary did not take cognizance of the fact that you need to have training. But the reality is, those aspects of training require a complete reimagination when it comes to curriculum and pedagogy. It may not necessarily be the best way to pursue training if most of the people who are coming to train are themselves part of the legal profession, be it lawyers or judges. You need a lot more outside engagement. You need opportunities for people to pursue serious knowledge and thinking. I mean, I'm happy to report that recently one of the judges of the Kerala High Court enrolled in a doctorate program and successfully completed with us. And I supervised his dissertation, and I was fascinated by the fact that he, after having spent so many years in judiciary, and he has his basic law degree from Oxford University, and I can tell the name is Justice Nambiyar of the Kerala High Court, and he enrolled the PhD purely because he felt that he was not having enough intellectual engagement while being in the court, and he wanted to rigorously pursue research and develop greater knowledge and thought process surrounding it. Now, I strongly believe that we need to have such opportunities available for our judges across the forum. We also need opportunities for master's degree programs. When I was teaching in Hong Kong many years ago, we had a partnership with the Chinese Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court judges of People's Republic of China would enroll in our LLM program, and they will come, and it's done in an interesting manner. Every 3 months, they will come for a few weeks, and over a period of 3 years, they will progressively complete the program. So in a way, the larger point I'm making is that it is not enough for judges who have an onerous responsibility to interpret the law and to tune themselves with current trends to only depend upon what they do on a day-to-day basis for advancing their knowledge. We really need to add more perspectives to it.
So, if you could tell me this, that in India, given its peculiarities, the three-tier judicial system, lower court, high court, Supreme Court, states have their own autonomy in that sense. The state judiciary actually, in fact, the state government has a huge role to play, everything from training to infrastructure. Is there any way to go about doing all this, about training judges?
Absolutely. So one of the untapped resource that we have, and we already, as I said, we have judicial academies, but our judiciary has so little engagement with our law schools. So if you look at the law schools across India, they are 1700 plus. They are spread across every state. And I would like to believe that the faculty members in the law schools have enormous resources, both intellectual resource as well as other forms of engagement. And we really want to build stronger collaborations and partnership for our judiciary with the law schools. The second thing we really need to do is that there ought to be, like how we do in universities, we have something called the faculty development workshops that are available for faculty members to develop their own, improving the teaching, improving the research, engaging. We don't have such opportunities for judicial training and capacity building. The third thing which you said is so important. For example, most of our judges are into generalized work. And today, with almost every sector, there is so much of specialization, but also so much of complexity. Many a time, we are in a very awkward situation where complex issues are being adjudicated by judges who simply may not have the knowledge, the training. Now, of course, they can read and intelligent people can understand and respond to it. But given the workload that they have, the kind of cases that they come before them, it's absolutely important to develop some degree of specialization. In some ways, the specialization should not be a hindrance for them to take more general work, but it should be an empowering dimension where complex issues, like we had Green Bench, for example, Justice Kuldeep Singh used to take care of that. Such areas of specialization, be it in tax or in investment or IP or other areas, there is a need for it. This has to happen much earlier. It cannot happen at the level of the Supreme Court. Ideally, it has to happen at the lower court if they are moving from up there, or at the High Court at least soon after they become judges. This requires a lot of engagement with institutions, and that's something which I strongly want to
The Parliament of India recently passed the Jan Vishwas bill. In the bill, they did away with 1,500 laws. They say we are in a sense, we have more laws than we need in India. Do you think such kind of new bills help declogging the judicial system, doing away with unnecessary laws?
Yeah, listen, of course, it's a welcome initiative. But we should also know that if you look at the clogging, the government is the largest litigant. So we really need to recognize that if the governments of the day, state and central, become far more disciplined and far more, let's say, conscious of the fact that the appeal processes become automatic, a lot of clogging will go down on that front as well.
In fact, one thing I want to highlight, all of you would also know, 20% of all caseload in the lower courts is check bounce cases. There is a check bounce, you go to court. Section 130 of Negotiable Instruments Act is just I mean, it is clogging the court. Do you think there should be some solution on these kind of issues?
Absolutely, Tarun. We need to do several things. So I mentioned about, one is of course the fact that government has to become more conscious about reducing the automatic appeals that end up having. Second, we need to focus also on decriminalization, something that effort has already begun. A lot of these cases can be brought through a different framework and not through the usual litigation. The third, something that has not happened enough, is we really need to focus on alternative dispute resolution, not just arbitration, but also mediation and conciliation, both of which have not seen the growth and development in India. If you look at advanced jurisdictions such as US, more than 90% of those cases do not go to the court.
I would joke.
They get settled before.
But many times a certain judge joked with me that whenever, Tarun, you come up with this phrase ADR, I can only hear alarming drop in revenue and not and not anything else. So,
Yes.
do you think that the fraternity also should accept
Oh,
ADR?
absolutely. I mean, lawyers are equally responsible for this situation. I think they need to recognize that the cause of access to justice is being undermined. And I think the reality is, if the legal system is, clogged with these cases, who is going to be affected more? The people who are needy, the people who are marginalized, the people who don't have ability to pay well to the lawyers, the people who are seeking legal aid, they are the ones who are going to be affected more. So we have no getting around the fact that we need to address the question of delays, because it has begun to threaten the very foundations of rule of law and access to justice.
One thing I want to ask you is about, because you said ADR, which is mediation and arbitration, the issue of time, cost and delay in arbitration. Because India gets a bad name whenever an arbitration is delayed and you're taking extension after extension, when you get dates after 3 and 4 months. So, and the cost, because time equivalents to cost, people end up spending crores. And I have many people coming up to me all the time and saying, Tarun, this is the third year the arbitration is going on. We're taking yet another extension. I don't know what will happen. My interest cost is ballooning. I have to pay my bank loans. Do you think that gives India a bad name?
Yeah. Well, you are familiar with the fact that both the legalization in the form of using the existing legal architecture and applying it to the dispute resolution world has impacted adversely. Judicialization of the arbitral proceedings has also impacted it. I mean, I'll make a controversial statement that both, I think, lawyers and judges, retired judges, but also lawyers are equally culpable in many ways making the institution of ADR more akin to the judicial process, when they should have done exactly the opposite. The very idea of dispute resolution was precisely to address the challenges, the problems of the current legal system. Unfortunately, that's not been the case. And so people are increasingly choosing other forums. And one of the reasons why India has not been able to become a leader in having a hub for arbitration is that people are having greater confidence in other forums than our own forums. And that is something that both Indian lawyers and judges need to think about.
One thing I want to ask you, along with continuing legal education, which is an important aspect, do you see increasing the number of judges vastly, an idea that the Chief Justice of India also put forth, is necessary and time has come? Or do you think we are doing fine with the existing number?
Well, we should definitely increase the number of judges. I mean, that's such an obvious thing to do, because the current situation, both in terms of population to judges ratio, we are among the lowest in the world, and we should do that. But I will also say that we have a fundamental problem at the level of legal education. You cannot have a situation where there are large number of mediocre law schools who are potentially leading to not so qualified lawyers, from where the pool of judges are going to be selected. I have no hesitation to say that we have a large number of mediocre judges across different courts, and that in no small measure contributes to delays and also lack of fulfillment when it comes to access to justice. So it's not just that if you had more positions and end up having more judges, but you really need to have competent people, efficient people, people with strong sense of both the knowledge of law and a deep sense of justice, which is critical. I think we should also not underestimate the role of technology. The Honorable Chief Justice has made very important strides in using and infusing technology into the justice delivery system. We need to take it to the lower courts. We need to take it to the district courts. We need to take it to the last mile connectivity when it comes to technology, because technology cannot be a privilege for the few up in the Supreme Court and in the high courts. I strongly believe that using of artificial intelligence in relation to certain aspects of judicial process will lead to greater efficiency in justice delivery. But the question is, how are we prepared to be able to use that technology? Because technology alone cannot be the solution. It has to be a combination of new imagination, creative ideas when it comes to using technology for addressing the issue of delays in the justice system.
Okay. Before I go on to the next question, I would like to say that the Chief Justice of India just declared 8 September as holiday. Anyways, we move on. For continuing legal education of judges, do you think our institutions are equipped to train judges? There are few world-class colleges, but I don't see many of them. Many of the law colleges barely have even full-time staff or lecturers, as they say. One thing is to train judges. Other is to having facilities to train judges. Some of the colleges that I have seen, the condition is not too good.
Yeah. Well, you know, when I talk about judicial training, let us not confine itself to be taught by only law professors and lawyers. There is a very strong need for having an interdisciplinary approach towards any form of training, especially judicial training. One of the things I worry about is that most of our judges don't have enough understanding of economics, for example. Today, in an increasingly complex world in which commercial disputes, where law and economics and the correlation between them is going to be a required knowledge for addressing these issues, we require that training as well. So the pool of faculty or experts you want to bring, A, need not be lawyers, B, need not be law professors, and in any case need not come from law schools. We should be looking at a whole range of institutions, including think tanks, research institutions, non-governmental organizations, intergovernmental organizations, as well as universities and other disciplines, because ultimately, when a judge is adjudicating these matters, he or she is not only relying upon the actual provision of law, which actually can be learned pretty easily, but they need to have a wider bandwidth to be able to understand the social, economic implications of their decisions.
Since the topic is continuing legal education for judges, while the panel was on, a second time sitting parliamentarian senior advocate, somebody who has served as the Advocate General of Madhya Pradesh joined us. So would you have any question to ask of Professor Rajkumar? The topic is continuing legal education for judges for better access to justice. Oh, would you?
Well, just the other day, Professor Rajkumar addressed us in the, he was called as a witness to the Standing Committee of Parliament. And what he said was quite mesmerizing. That's what we told him there also. But as I said, India still has a long way to go to reach what he envisaged as the new change. He has wonderful ideas, but there are not too many people or takers for those ideas today.
And your comment on continuing legal education for judges?
100%. Okay. Education, continuing legal education is important not only for judges but also for lawyers.
Correct.
You have to keep updating yourself, even for doctors. I mean, you can't rely upon what you had read 30 years back. If you want to be relevant today, you have to read what is happening today. I agree with him completely.
It's one final comment before
Sure.
we end this panel from you on the topic that we decided to.
So, Tarun, I think given the fact that we have a major challenge of the supply chain for when it comes to bright, lawyers taking up judges. In fact, one of the things that we are facing today is also that very successful lawyers do not want to become judges. And we really need to address that as well. Because unless and until we are able to ensure that the judges across the level, not just the Supreme Court, are people who are thoughtful, who have integrity, who have knowledge, expertise, skills, we really run the risk of threatening the very foundations of our democracy, because people have enormous faith in the ability of our justice system to deliver. And the second part of it is that while even after we have gotten those people into the judiciary, this should be a continuous process. It cannot be an annual event. There should be different ways and mechanisms by which judges are given opportunities to update their knowledge, to be able to have a comparative understanding of different workings of different code, making them aware of different tools of interpretation, constantly helping them address new trends in interpretation. For example, today what is happening is that there is a huge conversations happening among judges around the world. We really need to be part of that, and our judges need to be familiar with it. That's why they need time as well. I mean, sometimes sometimes people who don't understand the working of the judges make comments about our judges, and I feel very sad about it because they work very hard.
Yes.
And I mentioned that 1,000 judgments the Supreme Court of India delivers in a year, and that requires enormous effort. So you need to free up their time, because the nature of the adjudicatory activity requires a lot of imagination, a lot of time, and that time will also require for updating knowledge and perspectives. So we need to prioritize the continuing legal education for judges, and of course, as he rightly said, for the lawyers as well.
Thank you so much. Today, after Professor Rajkumar, we've got Dr. Tankha, then Dr. Singhvi, and a few other dignitaries who will be joining us. We'll take up this issue and also your opinions on that.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.